Oh, sorry. I was in the middle of something. What is up, my fellow Dunatics? It's been a little while since we've talked about Dune.
It's literally all you talk about.
Well, it's time to talk about it again, because now that we have a new Dune Prophecy series coming up, I figured some of you folks out there may need a little bit of a Dune primer for what we can expect to see in this new venture into the Duniverse. You may be asking, what is Dune Prophecy? What does this have to do with Dune? When does this take place? Who are all of these characters? Do I need to read all of these books? Wait, there are how many books? Well, fear not. And not just because fear is the mind killer, but because today I'm hoping to give you everything you need to know before you start watching Dune Prophecy. And before we get too far into this video, I should add that Nerdist is owned by Legendary Entertainment, which produces Dune and Dune Prophecy. But I read Dune before Legendary was even a company, so I would be talking about Dune on this channel no matter what. Plus, I am personally excited to see any new stories in the world of Dune's Imperium. So, with that all out of the way, let's dive into the history and the world of Dune and look at what we know from the books, as well as what we can glean from the show's trailers. But whether you've been an avid reader of the books, either some or all, or you're new to the Dune fandom after having watched the new films, this video will contain spoilers for key moments in Dune's history. I'll try to provide as general of an overview as I can, but I'll do my best not to spoil some of my favorite moments in case you do want to go back and read the books. So, with that said, if you don't want to be spoiled, I will Dune Prophecy you later.
Sacrifices must be made.
Okay, first things first. To better understand how this new series explores the beginnings of the Bene Gesserit, let's actually look at the Dune book series as a whole and establish some of its key lore. Originally, there were 6 books of the Dune saga, but now we also have numerous prequel trilogies and sequel entries, plus even a Dune encyclopedia that technically isn't canon, but it's still fun to read. If you do want to read all of these, I highly suggest you read them in publication order, since some of the prequels may spoil some big reveals in the original novels. Frank Herbert first wrote Dune in the 1960s and continued his Dune saga with 5 sequels before his death in 1986. And it's important to recognize the Dune saga's place in the world of science fiction at the time. Dune was part of a new wave of writing that was a reaction to the popular science fiction in the style of authors like Isaac Asimov. Asimov's Foundation series pioneered the concept of a galactic empire of humanity, and his Robot series portrayed humankind and robots working together to pave a path forward into the future. And Herbert basically wrote an antithesis to Asimov's vision with Dune. Now, all of this is to say, if you've only watched the film adaptations of Dune, you may not have realized that the world of Dune is one without advanced computers or artificial intelligence. There are machines, but machines that must rely on humans to operate them. The original novel explains that 10,000 years before Paul Atreides, humanity revolted against thinking machines during the Butlerian Jihad, and humans eventually outlawed advanced computers and technology. If you're familiar with Warhammer 40k, which is heavily influenced by Dune, you can see a similar theme where knowledge of advanced technology is lost and any remnants from the Dark Age of technology are either revered or seen as a threat. But along with this freedom from machines and artificial intelligence, a galactic empire arose that would hold humanity in stasis for the next 10,000 years. By the time of Paul Atreides, society has reverted back to a feudalistic structure. Religion has stoked such a fear of thinking machines that any new forms of advanced technology are deemed blasphemous.
Many machines are dicks. New machines.
Therefore, what limited technology that was actually allowed from millennia before is still the same technology used in Paul's time. Technology like the Holtzman effect, which allows for space travel, suspensors, and body shields, all remains the same. Some societies in the Empire, like the Ixians or House Urchesi, flirt with inventing new machinery, but nothing that would violate the edicts of the Butlerian Jihad. The Dune saga is one that proposes a future with human beings who advance their own physical and mental abilities without relying on technology. Instead, they advance themselves with drugs, like a lot of drugs, space drugs. Remember, this book was written in the 60s. This is why spice is so important, and without it, humans wouldn't be able to travel around the known universe, and people like Paul wouldn't be able to foresee the future.
The spice. It's in everything here.
Years after Frank Herbert's death, his son Brian Herbert teamed up with the author Kevin J. Anderson, and together they wrote the conclusion to the saga along with numerous prequels to the original 6 Dune novels. And in these prequels, we actually jump back those 10,000 years before Dune to the time of legends when humans revolted against thinking machines. In this time, society had become stagnant and complacent, and humans were entirely dependent on their machines. But then the humans who controlled the use of these machines used their advantage to dominate over the humans who didn't. These tyrants were known as the Titans, and formed their own empire as they lived for millennia in their advanced robot bodies. Eventually, even the Titans' technology got out of hand, leading to an artificially intelligent overmind controlling entire worlds and enslaving humans. This all culminates in the Legends of Dune trilogy with the Butlerian Jihad, when a robot kills the child of a human leader named Serena Butler, and she begins a revolution against the thinking machines. Butler's uprising evolves into a fanatical Luddite war against advanced technology and forces humanity down a path where it must find a way to maintain civilization. This war gets pretty complicated, with the Titans living as brains in giant crab-like war machines called Cymex, telekinetic sorceresses and poisonous drugs, and the machines unleashing a deadly plague on humanity, and the discovery of the effects of the spice melange. The machines are finally defeated in the Battle of Corrin, which ends with the Butler family changing their name to Corrino and establishing a new empire. But most importantly, the Battle of Corrin sees Vorian Atreides, son of the Titan Agamemnon, as the hero of the Butlerian Jihad. During this same battle, Abelard Harkonnen, who disobeyed Vorian's orders, was labeled a traitor and was banished, thus starting the Atreides-Harkonnen feud that would last for the next 10,000 years. In the Great Schools of Dune trilogy, we pick up 80 years after the defeat of the machines, to when many of the organizations which hold the Imperium together first fully formed. We see the beginnings of the Bene Gesserit Sisterhood as it grew from the remnants of a society of sorceresses. And now that humanity no longer uses computers, the Mentat School has begun training humans to advance their minds to compute mass calculations and projections. And with no artificial intelligence to help travel the vast distances of space, an early form of the Spacing Guild has used spice to create navigators, evolved humans who use prescience to foresee safe paths for their ships among the stars and planets. The new Corrino Empire is still forging the balance of power between its imperial authority, the navigators' control over commerce and travel, and the remnants of the Butlerian Jihad, as it battles any humans who remain sympathetic to machine technology. During all of this, though, the Sisterhood has begun manipulating the seats of power behind the scenes and has initiated its breeding program. The Sisterhood hasn't fully developed into the Bene Gesserit at this point, and hasn't begun breeding a Kwisatz Haderach like Paul. For now, though, their goal is to selectively breed leaders that they can control, so that those leaders won't lead humanity down a dark path, like during the dark times of the Butlerian Jihad. It is in this trilogy, in Sisterhood of Dune, that we meet a young Valia Harkonnen, the head of the Sisterhood in Dune Prophecy. We also meet her younger sister, Tula Harkonnen, and a few other important members of the Sisterhood, such as the first ever Reverend Mother Raquella Berto Anarul and Sister Dorothea. Oh yeah, and Vorian Atreides is still around thanks to the fact that his father was one of the evil Titans and injected him with an advanced life extension treatment, so the main Atreides character is a few hundred years old at this point. He may have also spent a lot of that time traveling the known universe and doing some of his own breeding experiments, if you know what I mean. So, with all of that backstory out of the way, we can finally take a look at Dune Prophecy. We're going to dive into this early stage of the Bene Gesserit Sisterhood, look at who all of these new characters are, and possibly what plot lines we could see unfold in this new story. By the time of Dune Prophecy, the threat of thinking machines and advanced technology still looms over this time period as humanity attempts to build a new empire and power structure. The Sisterhood has become an illustrious school for young women, a place where many royal houses send their daughters for training in political sciences, history, and even martial arts training. The Sisterhood has also become a valuable resource for the Emperor and the royal houses, as it trains its acolytes to become truth-sayers. In a world without computers, truth-sayers have become personal advisors to those in power, providing counsel, guidance, and, most specifically, the ability to tell if someone is lying or not. The trailers show how these truth-sayers have been placed in many of the powerful noble houses, and even in the Emperor's palace itself, pulling the right political strings from the shadows to influence the Imperium as the Sisterhood sees fit. We'll get to see how the Sisterhood School trains many of its acolytes, with many of the new characters created for this series. These young women usually hailed from noble houses, but others had been raised solely by the Sisterhood itself. The Sisterhood would sometimes keep an acolyte's parentage a secret so that they would only remain loyal to the Sisterhood. Additionally, an acolyte's genetic information was sometimes withheld in case she was part of the Sisterhood's larger plans. This method was still in practice during the events of Dune, with Lady Jessica never knowing her true father until much later in her life. Now in the trailers, we get a few brief shots of the first ever Reverend Mother, Raquella Berto Anarul. She is quite old by the time of the show, and began forming the Sisterhood back during the Butlerian Jihad. In the books, she was a doctor during the war, and discovered some of the healing properties of spice while researching a cure for the machine-released plague. Raquella survived the plague herself, and after also surviving a poisoning attempt, she developed her body's ability to process poisons, and this in turn unlocked her other memory. Thus, Raquella became the first ever Reverend Mother and began her new life's work to improve human beings and their natural abilities. She then formed the Sisterhood to train other women to do the same, and initiated a genetic breeding program to isolate certain genetic traits. On top of all of that, she is actually a granddaughter of the great war hero Vorian Atreides. Among the many adepts under her training, she had two protégés, her granddaughter Dorothea and another steadfast acolyte, Valia Harkonnen. In the books, Dorothea and Valia were best frenemies during their training, but eventually brought forth a schism in the early Sisterhood. Dorothea followed the anti-machine beliefs of the Butlerians and strictly forbade any of the sisters to use advanced technology. Valia is a pragmatist who will use whatever tools necessary, including the Sisterhood itself, to advance her goals. We see a quick shot in one of the teasers with young Valia and Dorothea standing in front of Raquella, so we will probably get to see some backstory of their rivalry. Clearly, Valia becomes the head of the Sisterhood by the time of Dune Prophecy, but it looks like we'll have to wait and see how the show adapts Valia's rise to this position of power. Valia Harkonnen is a dangerous character. The Harkonnens have lived in the shadow of her great-grandfather's alleged treason during the final battle of the Butlerian Jihad. Long before the Harkonnens were even granted fiefdom of Giedi Prime, they lived in exile on the icy planet of Lenkavale as they harvested whale fur for a living. Yes, whale fur. Young Valia and her brother Griffin aimed to reclaim the proper glory meant for House Harkonnen. While Griffin had political ambitions, Valia joined the Sisterhood to gain powerful footholds in the Imperium. At a young age, Valia was a formidable fighter, and even trained as a swordmaster for a time. But her combat skills aren't her most dangerous assets. Valia developed and perfected one of the Bene Gesserit's most powerful abilities, the voice. The voice allows a sister to command someone with the right words and tones. In the film adaptations, we see Reverend Mother Mohiam use the voice on Paul. Jessica uses the voice on the Harkonnen soldiers, and eventually Paul, a Bene Gesserit trained male, uses the voice on the Fremen. In the Dune Prophecy trailers, we can see a few shots of young Valia, and later older Valia, using the voice to command both Dorothea and Desmond Hart. And a quick fun side note, the voice developed from Frank Herbert's ideas of human beings advancing their inherent abilities. We, as normal everyday people, use voice all the time. Frank Herbert understood that if you know a person well enough, you can actually elicit any response from them that you want, basically by saying the right thing in the right way. For example, actually, Adam.
Yeah.
Oh, no, actually, come here real fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, so. And that's how you use the voice. I just commanded Adam to do something. He hates me right now. Obviously, with films and television being visual and auditory mediums, the voice has to be stylized quite a bit, but it is believable that human beings 20,000 years into our future could develop this everyday skill into some sort of supernatural power. And sure, you can think of the voice like Jedi mind tricks, but it's different and way cooler, and definitely the only thing that Star Wars stole from Dune. Anyways, back to Valia Harkonnen. This series will show her early days training to become a sister and her eventual rise to power as the Mother Superior of the Sisterhood. And as we see in the trailers, she aims to place a sister on the Imperial throne. But will her Machiavellian machinations intertwine with the remnants of House Harkonnen as its leaders play the political games of the Landsrat? We'll just have to wait and see if the Harkonnens end up sticking around after this show. But there is another Harkonnen who actually puts the sister in sisterhood. And that is Tula Harkonnen, Valia's younger sister. Tula has quite the complicated relationship with Valia, but she has always been obedient, remaining a pawn in Valia's schemes. In the books, Valia brought the young Tula into the Sisterhood and trained the young girl to become a weapon. In Dune Prophecy, it looks like Tula will continue following Valia, harboring many secrets for both themselves and the Sisterhood. The trailers also reveal a few short moments of young Tula as well, which makes me think we may see some of Tula's dark past and formative moments as she obeyed Value's bidding. And you can't have Harkonnens without the Atreides as well. But the only member of Paul's ancient family tree we see in the trailers is Kieran Atreides, a new character created for this show. At this point in the book timeline, the war hero Vorian Atreides is thought to be long dead, but he previously fathered numerous Atreides clans on various planets throughout the Imperium. We don't know exactly which Atreides line Kieran hails from, but his training as a sword master and the legendary Atreides name itself seems enough to grant him a position in the Imperial Palace training Princess Inez. Next up, we meet the royal family members of House Carino: Emperor Haviko Carino, Empress Natalia Arat Carino, Princess Inez, and her brother Constantine. These are the ancestors of the final Padishah Emperor, Shaddam IV, whom we meet in Dune and who abdicates the throne to Paul. At this stage in the Imperium, the power structure among the ruling factions is still precariously balanced. The Spacing Guild continues consolidating its control on space travel, and the spice trade continues developing into the bureaucratic monopoly we know it as by the time of Dune. The early Bene Gesserit continue finding their calculated places in the shadows to influence the Imperium. But the Emperor maintains power at this point in name only. The Carinos have not formed their fanatical Sardaukar army that we meet in Dune. Therefore, they do not yet rule with any sort of military supremacy. Emperor Haviko now rules after his father, Roderick Carino. Roderick was a well-respected emperor who quelled the remaining fanatics of the Butlerian Jihad. He also brokered the deal that officially formed the Spacing Guild. Readers met Haviko as a young child in the books, but now he must continue uniting many of the disparate worlds of the known universe under one empire, all while remaining vigilant against other powerful noble houses eyeing the throne. In one short story, we meet a young Emperor Haviko negotiating a potential marriage to help unite a confederation of worlds into his larger empire. But in Dune Prophecy, we meet Empress Natalia Arat, another new character created for the show. Chances are their marriage was most likely arranged for political purposes, but we'll just have to wait and see how much Natalia may or may not sway Haviko's decisions. Princess Inez looks to follow suit as we can see her involved in a marriage ceremony in the trailer. But she may already be sheathing swords with her swordmaster Kieran Atreides. Not just a pampered royal awaiting her time to take the throne, Inez is a fighter and we'll get to see her and Kieran take on a troop of soldiers with their elite fighting skills. But more importantly, however, the Sisterhood has also been training Inez, and she seems to be a pawn in the Sisterhood's schemes to gain influence and power over the Imperium. As for the remaining member of the royal family, Constantine, it's interesting to see that he is not the heir apparent, so there may be more to the royal family than the trailers reveal. And the show has yet another new character within the palace walls, and he is the mysterious Desmond Hart. All we know is that he is a charismatic soldier with an enigmatic past. And the key word in that description is charismatic. Frank Herbert wrote Dune because he believed, quote, charismatic leaders ought to come with a warning label on their forehead, may be dangerous to your health. And as we can see in the most recent trailer, charismatic leaders can evoke strong fanaticism among their followers, even in someone as powerful as the Emperor. Desmond claims to have some sort of power. The trailers showed Desmond appearing to counsel the Emperor, claiming that he himself can provide the truth to Haviko. We then see Desmond leading a group of elite soldiers, possibly even the beginnings of the Emperor's Sardaukar army. We also know from the trailers that Desmond wants to eliminate the threat of the Sisterhood. So, is Desmond foreshadowing a warning for future tyrannical leaders such as Paul, or even worse? Will the Sisterhood need to change their plans for the future to prevent threats such as Desmond? This looks to be a completely new danger to this early version of the Bene Gesserit. But what long-term effects will it have on the Sisterhood? The show itself is titled Prophecy, so this may be where the Sisterhood's plans for the future come into play and where one of Dune's most important themes comes to light. The Dune saga constantly plays with how both history and the future can be manipulated. Victors can write the history books however they wish, and prophets can interpret visions of the future correctly or incorrectly. Much like how Lord of the Rings recounts past eras, like the Years of the Trees, or how A Song of Ice and Fire remembers the Age of Heroes, or even Warhammer 40k regards the Dark Age of technology. So does Dune remember the time of the Great Revolt, often with many of the finer details glossed over. And as characters like Paul foresee the future, they are liable to misinterpret or affect their future to happen differently than projected. In the Dune books, we read many examples of how history is recounted, but then we see how events actually played out. Princess Irulan tells the legends of Muad'Dib as some sort of heroic tale, but we as the readers get to see Paul stumble around in the desert before he rises to power. Even the Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mohiam recounts the times of thinking machines to Paul, but differentiates between what history has taught him and what he should actually know. Throughout the Dune saga, we must constantly interpret the point of view of whoever records history. But in the Legends of Dune and Schools of Dune trilogies, and now also in Dune Prophecy, we get to see what actually happened in comparison to how past events may have been remembered or recounted. We also see how the early Bene Gesserit sisterhood differs from how we come to know them by the time of Dune. And more specifically, we may discover just how much Valia Harkonnen's point of view of both history and prophecy will affect the future. Anyways, folks, that should be everything you need to know before jumping into Dune Prophecy. We'll have to test our prescience as this series unfolds into a new chapter of the Dune saga. And if I missed anything, or if you have more questions about Dune history and lore, leave them in the comments section below and I'll do my best to provide some answers before the show starts. But in the meantime, tell us, are you excited for Dune Prophecy? What aspects of the Bene Gesserit do you want to see? And if you could see the future, would you want to? Let us know in the comments below and I'll put a pin in it for now. For all the latest and greatest in the world of pop culture, stay tuned to Nerdist.com. Is this bad?